We start with hazard assessment. How do we identify the hazards in a city? We need to identify hazard in terms of the type of hazards which are occurring in the city. The assessment has to be done through identification of all the hazards which are present in the city. It can be in terms of industrial activities or any other activities which generate toxicity or which are hazardous activities, in terms of maybe in terms of hazardous waste generation also. So there are various activities in the city has to be identified depending upon the city and listed out, and also the special distribution of these activities need to be mapped. Hazard maps provide important information to help people understand the risks of natural hazards and helps mitigate the disaster. And hazard maps indicate the extent of expected risk areas and can be combined with disaster management information such as evacuation sites, evacuation routes, etc. So once we identify the hazard, we have to understand the frequency of the hazard, the risk and the coverage, the magnitude and the intensity, the causes of the hazard, and also try to understand new and potential hazard for the city, because city is dynamic, and with city growth new activities or new hazards would also pose a risk to the city. Let us understand hazard assessment through case studies, how cities have worked out or assessed the hazard. As you can see here, the New York City, and New York City, the city of New York has assessed the hazards in terms of extreme heat hazard, inland flood hazard, and coastal flood hazard. That means hazard assessment has been done based on various parameters, that is heat, flood, both for inland as well as coastal, and it has been mapped. The extreme heat hazard map shows the heat stress based on surface temperature and air pollution. The inland flood hazard map is based on 311 calls for street flooding or basement flooding. The coastal flood hazard map, which is actually the hurricane inundation zones, is based on the map provided by the Office of Emergency Management. So you can see from this case study how one can generate maps, different maps, depending upon the context of the city. Now, what do we do with these maps? These maps are separate, segregated information which needs to be combined, and a composite hazard map is generated. You can see here the composite hazard map of New York City, which shows which shows a range from very low, medium, high to very high hazard areas. This is the special variation in the combined hazards. This is worked out based on a rational process. For example, areas which are very high shows the presence of all the hazards, shows the intensity of the hazard, shows the frequency of the hazard, and also shows the magnitude of the hazard. So based on all such parameters, the hazards are graded. The next example is of Tacloban city in Philippines. You can see here the flood hazard map, the landslide hazard map, the storm surge hazard map, and you can also see the gradations from low to high. The next example is from Srinagar, from Greater Srinagar. The flood hazard zonation map of Greater Srinagar with the gradations, that is high, moderate, low, no flood areas, are shown in this map, and this map has been generated based on past flood inundations, based on the elevation zones, based on the river, the floodplains. So based on all the base data pertaining to flood, the flood hazard zonation map is generated.